Hey, welcome to episode 4 of You Gotta Be Kidding Me. This episode looks at stuff to do with the countercurrent exchange in the loop of Henle. Okay, I think this is probably the worst topic in kidney physiology, and it's one where you can definitely get lost in the YouTube rabbit hole of stuff. What I've tried to do is condense it into nice, simple ideas. Essentially, if you know the words on this page, then you should be okay. Um, Understanding it, that's a separate issue, but it's difficult to understand and it's difficult to explain, so apologies if this is not very clear. Okay, proximal convoluted tubular and proximal straight tubular. This is where our fluid and our filtrate is kind of started its journey in the nephron, and then it's going to enter the thin descending limb and then go up the thick ascending limb of the loop of Henle. The job of the loop of Henle is it wants to maintain movement across its entire length. And one key point of doing this is to concentrate fluid. And by concentrating fluid at the bottom and then having this kind of curve shape, you're able to maintain fluid moving at the entire length of it. Okay, and this occurs in the medulla. So in the thick ascending limb, what you have is sodium is pumped out throughout the entire length of the thick ascending limb. And if we start here for now, it just kind of makes more sense just starting here. So what happens is sodium is removed from the lumen via a channel called NKCC2, and then it's dumped into the interstitium by the NAK antiporter, and this occurs throughout the entire length of the thick ascending limb. So what we're doing is we're making the interstitium salty, and remember the general rule is that where sodium goes, water is going to follow because of osmosis. But so obviously water now wants to follow into the interstitium here. However, the thick ascending limb lacks aquaporins, lacks water channels, so no water can follow through on this side. So what happens instead is fluid coming on this side. Oh, also, it's important to know that fluid coming from this side is around 300 milliosmoles, so it's around the same as plasma osmolality. So fluid coming here, which is almost the same as fluid in the blood, will have water drawn out because where sodium goes, water follows. Now, why does it happen on this side? Because the thin descending limb has permanent aquaporin 1 proteins which are embedded in them, which allow water to pass through. So water passes through these channels and gets drawn out into the interstitium here. How does this affect the lumen here? Well, the lumen here, basically, it's losing all its water, so it's becoming more and more concentrated. By the time you get to the bottom, so it's becoming hypertonic. By the time you get to the bottom of the limb, it gets really, really hypertonic to the point where you get, this is a key number here, 100 and 1200 milliosmoles. So that means that your solution here, your filtrate here, is super concentrated. And finally, what that means is that because there's lots of sodium here, it means that there's lots of sodium that can be pumped out. So there's a high concentration that can be pumped out. So this is how basically we're back to stage 1 again. So essentially the point of this is that we've got a really concentrated bit at the bottom. And what that means is that, so we start from 300 here. And by the time we're ending at our so by the time we're ending at your thick ascending limb and you're kind of starting in your distal convoluted tubule here, you're also at around 300 as well. So 300 and 300 and 1200 at the bottom. And essentially, this gets more and more concentrated here, and this gets less and less concentrated here. So eventually, you have, what happens is you have a concentration gradient is maintained throughout. So stuff can move, water can be drawn out throughout, which means water can be basically absorbed throughout. So the point of the nephron is to absorb water throughout the loop of the Henle. Okay, hopefully that makes sense, maybe a little bit of sense. If not, I'm sorry. It's a really hard topic. Okay, there's a second layer of complexity to this, as if this wasn't hard enough, and that's called the vasa recta. So the vasa recta are the special type of capillaries that supply the loop of Henle. So in the PCT, PST, they were called peritubular capillaries. Here, they're called vasa recta. So recta means straight, so they're straight capillaries, and they flow opposite to the loop of Henle. So the descending part flows this way next to the ascending bit, and the ascending part of the vasa recta flows next to the descending loop of Henle. So the descending portion of the vasa recta, it's going into an area that is more and more concentrated. So right at the bottom here is very concentrated. So your blood here, which starts off at around 300, it gets very concentrated at the bottom. So what does that mean? That means that water in the blood is going to move out into the interstitium, and also by osmosis, NaCl and urea are going to move in to your blood to kind of equilibrate it. So by the time we've got to the bottom, we've pumped out some water from, well, not pumped out, water has been drawn out from the vasa recta, and so i.e. secreted, and sodium and urea have been reabsorbed into the blood. Now, now you have more solutes in your blood here, and you have more concentrated blood, and your ascending portion of your vasa recta wants to become less concentrated by the time it's reached the top here. So what's this going to do? This is basically going to secrete NaCl because it wants to become less concentrated and reabsorb water. So the water that is drawn out from the thin descending limb is going to actually go into the ascending vasa recta, so that by the time the ascending vasa recta is at the top here, it's got enough water to be at the same 300 milliosmol concentration. Okay, that was really complex. I probably did a horrible job of explaining it, but hopefully these textbooks make things a little bit simpler.